Welcome to the Intelligent Growth for Trial Attorney Firms New Times Call for New Measures webinar. I'm your host and I'll be moderating today. My name is Jeremy Pook. I run Senior Attorney Match based in the Boston area. Senior Attorney Match works with attorneys that have practiced more than 30 years, helps them to sell their law firms by joining growing law firms. And Senior Attorney Match has a niche area working with trial attorneys. Today, we're welcoming as our guests two of the best in the trial attorney space, Ari Kornhaber from Esquire Bank. Ari is a co-founder and executive vice president of Esquire Bank. Esquire Bank is a federally chartered commercial bank based in New York, focuses on servicing the unique financial needs of lawyers, law firms, and their clients, with a special affinity towards trial lawyers throughout America. Very exciting new news on Esquire Bank is that Raymond James just ranked Esquire Bank the #1 community bank in the United States. Peter Webb is joining us from Scorpion. Peter is a founding member and senior vice president of Scorpion's personal injury law division. With offices in California, New York, and Texas, Scorpion oversees internet marketing strategy campaigns for over 350 trial attorney firms nationwide, per its motto, building a better way. Intelligent growth for trial attorney firms, New Times Call for New Measures. And of course, we have to say that we're in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. We're 8 weeks into the pandemic here in the United States, and actually businesses are starting to open up. When it comes to trial attorneys, they really never closed. And I'll just share before handing over to Ari and Peter for their discussion. And a colleague of mine creates this metaphor of having two hands up and your chin up throughout this pandemic. And that's really what trial attorneys epitomize. They're fighting for their clients, working hard in their businesses. They didn't stop at all. So Ari, our first opening remarks by you, looking for you to give us some advice on intelligent growth for trial attorney firms from the banking perspective. Please.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm honored to be a part of this podcast today, so thank you for having me. There are opportunities right now for law firms to not just survive this pandemic and the resulting economic slowdown, but to actually thrive. And the way that law firms can thrive even through an economic slowdown such as the one we're all experiencing is to be financially prepared for what comes next. Most of the law firms that Esquire Bank works with are contingency fee law firms. And I've been speaking to most of my clients throughout this pandemic, and I'm hearing a lot of consistent issues and concerns and feedback. And while most of them are saying they are still open for business, their hands are up, their chins are up, and they're still settling cases and actually conducting some mediations and the like, those are the cases that the law firm signed up in the past. They're working on an inventory that was generated in the past. Contingency fee attorneys aren't going to feel the true effects of this slowdown and the impact on their supply chain for another 12 to 18 months. Because while they're still able to actively work on their existing docket, they're certainly not signing up as many cases as they were in the past because of all of the stay-at-home orders. So lawyers have to run their law firms like a business. They can no longer just practice law and be in the profession of law. And Esquire Bank believes that the best way to plan for the slowdown of their cash flow, the interruption of their cash flow that is coming, is to have access to capital today. And there's a few options out there. Certainly plenty of lenders out there. I just want to touch on the type of financing that I think every lawyer should be exploring now, whether they are self-financed and don't have lines of credit or if they're current borrowers. And that would be a traditional working capital line of credit. These are lines of credit that are typically used for short-term business needs. So most attorneys probably received a PPP loan from the SBA, which was a wonderful loan, which should be forgiven and therefore become a grant. That covers 2 months worth of expenses. I'm talking about planning for the long game. And that means having access to these lines of credit that you could use for your overhead, your rent, your payroll, etc. And they could also be used for growth opportunities, such as marketing for case acquisition.
Great. And Ari, could you please tell us how Esquire Bank distinguishes itself from other banks that trial attorneys will typically work with? How does Esquire Bank, for example, how do they look at the inventory of a trial attorney practice?
The best way to explain this would be to say that Esquire Bank is an asset-based lender, an ABL. The assets that we lend against are the contingent cases that the law firms are currently working on. Every other bank in the country, when they look at a contingency fee attorney and consider providing them a line of credit, they'll make that credit decision based on the financial history of the law firm. Esquire Bank will also look at the credit history, but more for regulatory know your customer reasons. When we try to determine how much money we could lend a law firm, it starts with your case inventory. Because if we want to project what the law firm is going to generate in revenue over the next 12, 24, and 36 months, it's their current case inventory that's going to tell us that. So we have lawyers on staff that can do an appraisal of that inventory to, again, determine how much we could lend the law firm, and then we could help the law firm decide how to allocate that availability among different financial products.
Great. And Ari, you said before about planning for the long game. I mean, if we were, here we are almost heading towards mid-year. And if we had this planning for the long game discussion in January, it would be markedly different. Okay. The planning for the long game is just out the window as a result of the pandemic. So Peter, really want to hand it over to you in terms of, Scorpion. We heard before that Scorpion leads internet marketing strategy campaigns for trial attorneys nationwide. Under this umbrella of intelligent growth for trial attorneys during and post COVID-19, Peter, can you let us know how Scorpion reacting? What are they advising to trial attorneys to do as they're planning for the long game?
Absolutely. And first and foremost, thank you so much for having me on. It's great to be on with Ari and yourself. It's always great to, a meeting of the minds to really see how we can help, trial firms throughout the country better position themselves in these unprecedented times, right? So I think the first thing that I would like to touch on is let's define intelligent growth, because different firms, different people have different ideas of what that means. And so for me to properly answer how we would address not only now, but into the future, creating an intelligent growth strategy, whether it's funded, for instance, with Ari and something like that to really level out the peaks and valleys that a trial firm experiences. Really intelligent growth, at least in my words, would be the strategic expansion of cases, firm size, geography, market share in a sustainable fashion. Right. And so that's a big difference. Then you get a large settlement, you throw it into, let's say, marketing, or throw it into something, and then you kind of see where things are at, and then your money's tied up and you say, shoot, what do I do now? So really looking at that intelligent growth, make sure that you're never taking one step forward, two steps back. Right. And so to accomplish that, really what you need is you need a plan that really entails spending dollars wisely. Right? Not just for managing the practice, but also any new marketing initiatives is a good example. Or what's it costing to litigate the cases versus what you're bringing in the door, paying attention to, that type of thing. Or even building additional infrastructure internally, whether it's to provide a better client experience, right? Or if it's just to increase what docket you have and what availability of case types that you can do. So that's what I would say about that, at least for me and at Scorpion. In terms of the focus, I focus now and into the future on the same factors I always would, is taking a fresh look at what the major problems that trial firms face today. And to really simplify those problems down into, let's say, 3 different problems. One, the most obvious, we need more cases. We need better cases, whether it's volume or quality of cases. The next problem is we're not getting in front of, or we're not getting calls for the types of cases we want. So they don't have the exposure, or they're losing out to other firms that may be marketing their practice a little better. And the most common one has to do with wasting money. Okay, and that means whether you have a marketing partner that's not producing, or what you're spending is too high for what the case acquisition should really be, or you're leaving money on the table because you're not getting the cases and they're going elsewhere, right? So I would look at it not only now, but post-COVID, as we go through the various stages to the new normality. What's realistic? And so when I look at a law firm, I look at those factors, and at the end of the day, I look, and Ari touched on a lot of these things. I look at what are the goals, what can they handle, what's their infrastructure, and then I would just tailor a plan around what's realistic, right? So for that intelligent growth. And that usually entails a multi-phased approach, usually over the course of 1, 3, maybe even 5 years, so that way it is a sustainable solution.
Great, thank you. And could you provide us with a couple of examples for how the pandemic has already changed how trial attorneys market?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, let's take a fresh look at how different times really are right now, right? More people are at home than ever before. They're not commuting. They might not be nearly as distracted as they ever were. They're at home, whether they're spending time, watching television, pursuing hobbies, whatever that is. One of the factors is they're spending a lot of time on the internet, especially social channels and things like that. So one of the ways that firms are really focusing on marketing themselves is paying attention to where the attention's at, right? Where of their potential clients. So that would mean some of these social channels like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever that is, how can you better connect with where your client's attention is at? So that's one pretty important thing. Also, the amount of people that are on YouTube. YouTube is the second largest search engine outside of Google's homepage. So there's a lot of attention, obviously, on YouTube. So if you have the correct video assets that were shot recently with a relevant message, that's a great place to also go. And then, of course, there's streaming television services. A lot of people are watching, whether they're binge watching or whatever they're doing. There are some opportunities there. So I would say that another high level thing is they're focusing on building their brand. Right. And I think it's important to define what that means. A lot of law firms, when I meet with them, they say, well, what exactly do you mean by that? Is that our letterhead logo? What does that exactly mean? It's really how the firm is perceived by their potential clientele, clients or peers, whoever it is. Right. In fact, I've seen a group of firms really embrace the social media approach, and they're doing charitable contributions of large quantities of buying food for hospitals and first responders in the hundreds. And then they're posting it on social channels, and it's gaining like thousands and thousands of likes and attention. And it's really giving a new look to the firm instead of the more cash for your crash. We're money driven, right? Which sometimes affects as a stigma for certain firms. And it shows the more human side of, no, we care about this. We're in it together. So those are a couple factors that I think how firms are targeting new channels, new approaches to generate business.
Great. And one thing we've talked about before, Peter, and I'd like to transition to this in terms of this theme that Ari, you've introduced of planning for the long game. And it's hard to plan for the long game right now. I mean, Ari, you brought up about the PPP, and people are trying to get through this month to next month. But as firms are thinking about investing intelligently with marketing, what is the interplay between operational infrastructure and investing in that and internet marketing strategies? So Peter, if we could start with you, because you and I have gone back and forth on that several times, because people think of Scorpion for internet marketing strategy, but because you have such a focus and you've worked so many years with trial attorneys, you also recognize the need to have the infrastructure also there for when the phones start to ring and the texts start to come in. So could you please address that?
Oh, absolutely. One of the funny things is when I'm doing my discovery process with a lot of firms, and it's identifying what are the goals, like what are you looking to achieve, and I want as many cases as I can possibly handle. I have an unlimited budget, and I kind of chuckle to myself a little bit, because that's not the end game. That's not the sole reason you should just throw as much money at it. It has to be a little bit more well thought out, because in terms of just because you can spend it doesn't mean you should. Right? You should really, and tying to Jeremy, your question of the infrastructure, you need to be able to handle the volume of calls and the intake processes and determine if the potential cases you're signing are actually even worth signing based on what the cost was to generate it, right? So looking at it not in so much of an immediacy, but over the long term, also, am I generating the client experience I want to have? So let's say you get funding, or let's say you get a big case and you get a big settlement check, and you say, okay, great, I have all this money to market now with. If you have one person answering the phone, right, and you go wild with making the phone ring off the hook, and people are on hold and they're getting a bad experience, that's one of the top ways that bad reviews occur. Is because they say, hey, I was on hold, I never got a call back from attorneys, right? And it's a very common thing. And so now it's a counterproductive effort. You're actually pushing forward, meaning you're creating a bad experience, which might mean future initiatives are now hindered because of it. So that's why infrastructure is a very important thing to have in place, that you don't stress overly, and the marketing goes hand in hand with the infrastructure.
Great. And Ari, before you'll start to comment on that, I'll just add some 2 cents. I think a lot of firms will think of reaching out to a bank, including Esquire, to be able to fund their case costs. And Esquire has interesting approaches to case costs, and it'd be interesting for you to touch on that too. But why should trial attorneys contact Esquire Bank in these 2 areas that Peter's bringing up? That is to fund marketing intelligently and infrastructure, the appropriate infrastructure to have in place when investing those dollars in marketing.
Yeah, like Peter said, this is all part of an overall business plan. And it goes back to what I said earlier. A lot of trial lawyers, admittedly, are not great business people. They can pick up a file they've never seen before and try the case the same day. But when it comes to their budgets and their planning and their P&L and their balance sheet, that's not their area of expertise. So to work with a scorpion, someone like Peter, to help get your house in order will just allow your brand to excel and hopefully meet your core values, and to be able to execute on your marketing initiatives and the like. And Esquire Bank brings something similar to the equation. These are critical decisions that you need to make when you're practicing law. Who is your partner going to be? Are you going to be a sole practitioner? Are you going to only do car accidents, or are you going to diversify into mass tort as well? How do you want your brand to be perceived on the street? What type of case management system are you going to utilize? All of these things, and kind of begs the question, well, how am I going to pay for it all? So any smart business person will at least explore the financing options that are available. And to the case costs that the attorneys are undoubtedly incurring when they're practicing law, it creates an interesting opportunity for both the law firm and a potential lender. The rules of ethics expressly allow contingency fee attorneys to finance their case costs, and the interest that is charged can be treated as a case cost itself and be passed through to the client. That creates essentially an interest-free loan to the law firm. Now let's just pause and think about that for a second. I can think of another industry where they could have access to capital and have a third party pay the interest. It's a wonderful opportunity. That arrangement has to be disclosed in the retainer agreement, the contract between the attorney and their client. And the rules of ethics also expressly state that only the interest that accrues on each disbursement that you're financing can be passed through. So that creates a potential bookkeeping nightmare for a law firm if they try to do this in-house. Again, there are experts, Esquire Bank's one of them, that you could outsource that to the expert. So with Esquire Bank, we set law firms up with a separate line of credit. We call it case disbursement line of credit. And when a law firm draws down from that line of credit to finance a case cost, it triggers the software and the personnel behind the scenes to track every case and every disbursement within each case and do the accounting on each disbursement that they're financing, so that number one, they're compliant with the controlling rules of ethics. And if a client wants to know halfway through a case how much money a law firm has borrowed to finance disbursements, they have access to that information live, real time, to the penny. So it becomes very important. Moreover, if you compare that opportunity to a law firm that is self-financed, meaning they do not have lines of credit, a self-financed law firm is a diamond in the rough and is today very attractive to a bank. Number one, they have low-cost deposits, the IOLTA deposits. And number two, if they're self-financed, generally speaking, they have a good financial history. And that, again, is what banks generally look to when they're contemplating providing lines of credit. But a self-financed lawyer who's using their own money to pay for case costs is essentially giving their clients interest-free loans with their after-tax dollars. Now, that's not a good business decision in a booming economy, let alone where we currently reside, right? So I would express to attorneys who are self-financed, one of the ways to plan for the long game is to contemplate either changing your retainer agreement, or if you've already done so, exploring the opportunity to finance your disbursements, thereby freeing up your after-tax dollars that are sitting in your cases depreciating, and maybe deploying those dollars with someone like Peter to improve your brand, to generate better and more cases, or to invest in your infrastructure, hire more or better talent, case management systems, etc.
And also, Ari, we've discussed that Esquire can determine the amount of a loan based upon the case inventory that a given trial attorney firm has, but Esquire Bank does not limit the use of those funds to case disbursements, right? I mean, if a firm wanted to use part of a loan from Esquire Bank to help fund those expenses that ethically, as you explained before, that the client could wind up paying the interest on, lawyers and trial firms can also be using those funds for infrastructure investments and intelligent marketing like Peter's describing. Is that right?
It is. That's correct. Most law firms that borrow money from Esquire Bank take two lines of credit. One dedicated to their case costs, and a separate line of credit which could be used for those other business needs. And let me just add to that, we love when a law firm comes to Esquire Bank, takes a working capital line of credit, which again, we've already determined how much we could lend them based on their current inventory of cases. Then they use some of this availability and work with someone like Peter, a best-in-class case acquisition company and more, to aggregate more cases, which in turn provides Esquire Bank with additional collateral, which we can therefore potentially lend more money to the law firm. And if they're a progressive law firm really looking for a well thought out, prudent plan to grow, we can help capitalize that.
Great. So let's look to the future, guys. Ari, credit you and Esquire Bank. You're really creating and introducing this motto of let's not just survive, let's thrive. Okay, there are opportunities to thrive even now in the pandemic. So looking to the both of you to identify a few banking and marketing opportunities for trial attorneys that they can implement now to thrive and not just survive post-COVID. So Ari, could you pinpoint a couple of opportunities for trial attorneys to consider?
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing that every law firm should be doing if they're a contingency fee attorney, which is analyzing their case inventory and preparing projections in terms of both revenue and duration. Meaning, when are these cases going to resolve, even if it's annually, this year, months 13 to 24 or beyond, and approximately how much are these cases going to settle for. This way they can make some projections on their net attorney's fees and plan for the future. Again, there will be an interruption in their cash flow. If they take the time today to analyze their inventory in terms of revenue and duration, they will be more prepared for whatever comes next.
And Peter, how about yourself from the marketing side?
Well, funny enough, Ari just hit the nail on the head. I was going to speak almost the same thing. Really, what Ari does and what Esquire Bank does, it has a perfect parallel with what we do, which is so funny because a firm could come to me and say, I need a marketing plan because I feel I'm not getting as many cases as I want. And then after doing a very thorough discovery process and putting together a tailored plan, I would send them right over to Ari to get the funding. Why dip into your own pocket when it makes more sense, especially today? I mean, Ari hit on quite a few points that are pretty strong arguments as to why looking to the bank to obviously fund those things instead of doing interest-free loans for your clients, especially this is not a booming economy. So I think that having the projection of cases, let's just say if you did exactly what Ari just said, that'll give you an idea of where you're at, because then you'll see the gaps. What do you need to do? Marketing initiatives should be tied to what the long-term goals are, right? So if you say, shoot, my 80% of my docket used to be motor vehicle accidents, not a lot of people are driving right now. That will change, but there's going to be a lull. So maybe looking at some of the other opportunities that are out there, but it takes step one. Get an understanding of what you have, right? The projection, the duration, what the projections of what that value is going to be. That's going to put you in a better position where it's not an unknown, right? Then the next step is, what are you going to do about it? Maybe what got you cases before might not work the same way moving forward. If you're relying on, let's say, referral business, right? Well, maybe you spend more time networking to strengthen those bonds, but then largely the truth is you're relying on those people to make sure that they're doing their marketing correctly or doing, getting out in front of people. If you're getting cases directly and you see a lull, maybe advertising or marketing comes into play. You might need to allocate more costs, which again, plays into maybe reaching out to Ari or something like that and just doing an evaluation of, what capital is available for you. And then from that, I would, again, very simply, I would look at, okay, based on this allocation, based on case types, firm size, infrastructure, based on all these factors, here's an intelligent, sustainable plan based on that budget, based on case acquisitions, and then based on the projections of what that's worth and why we believe that's going to provide enough of a return to put the firm in a better position because you met Ari and myself, just as an example. So that's how I love the word thrive. There's not just survive. It's because it's a very positive. There's a lot of opportunities. Ari, opened up today's podcast with that. Hey, let's thrive about this. And it's like, great. Let's put a plan together. Let's put money against it. Let's open our eyes as to those opportunities, and we all win. With that story.
Great. And I'll just add as a concept that, of course, Senior Attorney Match, and you guys know very well what we promote, which combines both the banking and marketing, is the opportunities for consolidation in law right now. That is, if a growing law firm is looking to grow, needs new clients, needs new referral sources, senior attorney-led firms, trial attorneys that have practiced more than 30 years to join growing law firms really accomplishes the cash flow issue, because senior attorneys, similar to any trial attorneys right now, they have inventory. That inventory can turn into cash flow. The senior attorneys also offer to growing law firms the referral sources that can continue to refer in business that we all are going to need during that lull that Ari is talking about. And what else the senior attorneys bring to the table is trial experience. One thing that we talk about among ourselves often is, as these younger firms are doing the marketing and they are thinking about the infrastructure, bringing on a senior attorney with 20, 30 years of trial experience, automatically when those types of senior attorneys join growing law firms, they actually make all of the cases in the firm rise in value, because the insurance companies, the insurance defense attorneys that have gone toe-to-toe with senior attorneys for many years, when they find that the senior attorneys have joined growing law firms, then the senior attorneys get to work on cases that they absolutely love. It's a great win-win. And from the marketing standpoint, many of the senior attorneys, they're just not keeping a pace. And frankly, they may never keep a pace with the younger firms. And when a senior attorney with great goodwill and great reputation joins a growing law firm, and that firm can then come to Scorpion and ask Scorpion, how do we promote such and such an attorney, that this attorney, who is a former president often of a local trial attorneys association and has other great goodwill in the community. It's a great way to leverage opportunities to bring in new matters.
Absolutely. Just to chime in on that, I think Jeremy, you and I have talked about this many times. The match made in heaven is really the younger, attorneys with this driving impetus of, they want to aggressively grow, like we talked about today, intelligent growth. The marketability really becomes an exponential factor when there's an expert, veteran trial attorney that's really seen everything and been there, and the insurance companies, quote unquote, already know who that is. That makes the marketability much, much more attractive and much more effective, which then brings in Ari, where he then sees, here's the caseload, here's the docket, here's the value, here's a projection, here's a budget, here's what we can do with the operating capital. So really, it's kind of it's a symbiotic relationship where really the truth is the three of us and what we do really is aimed at helping these firms get more of the cases they should be getting, which helps injured victims or those people who need representation get in front of who they should. And that's what this is all about, is really helping people.
Well, great. Thank you both so much, Ari, Peter, for laying out today the intelligent growth for trial attorney firms. These are new times. They call for new measures. It's a time to thrive, not just survive. And please reach out to Ari, reach out to Peter, reach out to Senior Attorney Match. We're here to help, as Peter just said. And thanks, guys, so much for joining.
Absolutely.